Everybody, thank you for tuning in to PVD Horror. My name is Dave, and today I am very, very excited. I have a guest joining me who, how do I even start to describe his catalog of work? So Dennis Paoli, who's been a screenwriter for projects such as Re-Animator, From Beyond, Ghoulies 2, Castle Freak, The Dentist, Body Snatchers, the list goes on and on. And today we are here to talk about his latest work, which is called Suitable Flesh, and it's an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, directed by Joe Lynch, starring Heather Graham, Judah Lewis, and Barbara Crampton, releasing in theaters on October 27th, as well as available to rent at that time as well. So, Dennis, thank you so much. Thank you. I feel like I feel like I'm in the presence of cult horror greatness. That's the only way I can describe this.
I'm not sure that's a compliment, but I'll take it.
In our world here, it is the utmost compliment.
Okay, cool.
So
I'm down with
we
that.
love it. We love it. Yeah. So where do I
start? Actually, let me make this absolutely clear. It is primarily reflected greatness. Screenwriting, which is fun, and I wish it were as lucrative as it is fun, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Is only the first step in a long and large collaborative effort to make a movie.
Such a great point.
And the greatness that has come to be reflected on me is that, of course, of Stuart Gordon, who I want to make sure is in every interview I do. I want to remember Stuart, as Stuart was as responsible for the quality and the fun and the thrills in our films as all the rest of us put together. So I just want to remember Stuart. I also want to remember him because he was my best friend for a long time. And it is great to make movies with friends.
Absolutely.
Which leads me to talk about Suitable Flesh, because then I got to reconnect with Barbara Crampton. Not only stars in this movie and is wonderful, but was one of the driving forces in our earlier films, in the earlier Lovecraft adaptations, and it was great to reconnect with her. We were close acquaintances for a long time, and we're better friends now. She is. It's her reflected greatness that makes Suitable Flesh the fun that it is, the thrill that it is, and connects it to those earlier works as much as my work. And I want to give serious credit to the fact that I get to bask in the reflected greatness of Joe Lynch's work. I didn't know Joe before Suitable Flesh. I didn't know him personally. And one, a terrific guy. Two, smart as a whip. And the terrible cliche, smart as a whip. Let me see if I can do something better.
That term is
just aged. A smart guy. He's just and boy, does he love film, and does he love filming, and watch his work. Watch the work in Suitable Flesh. There, he pulls out every trick a director can use, and it demonstrates a marvelous understanding, not just of what film can do, but of the history of what film can do. Joe's the real thing, and it was really a special treat to be able to work with him, and to see that the work we did in that genre, the genre work that Stuart and I did, is able to be carried on with much the same commitment to the thrills that the genre is capable of and the fun that the genre is capable of, in even a new form, with even more tricks up its sleeve.
Yeah.
So I want to, all of those people. I don't think, I deny the adjective great in relation to my work, but
Right.
I will say that it's been great collaborating with Stuart and Barbara and Joe.
Okay. I appreciate the humbleness that you embody
It's not
here.
It's not humility. If you knew me better, you would know that I have no humility whatsoever. That that I'll take credit for anything that swims
Sure.
by.
Yeah.
But those guys and that woman deserve,
Yeah.
terrific credit for the work that we do.
So obviously you have, your resume speaks for itself as far as the films that you've been involved in. And like I mentioned, like a lot of those are considered to be like cult horror classics. Some of them are just horror classics.
Mhm.
Those are some significant works. And I want like it couldn't have been all just bright spots in a career, right? Unless it has been, and that's amazing for you. But I imagine there's been highs and lows. And I was wondering if you could describe like maybe some of those career highs, and if you would be so kind to share, like what were some of those career lows?
Uh, you mentioned Ghoulies too, which is I squint when I see that on my resume. It's again, I'm not sure what kind of praise it is when people tell me, that's my favorite Ghoulies film. Because Ghoulies was a knockoff of Gremlins, and it was back in the day when I admit to writing that script in about, I think it was 12 days,
Okay.
which, if you know anything about
Yeah.
screenwriting, is pretty quick.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm really happy with a lot of the work in it. Charlie Band, the impresario of Empire Films back in the day, uh, got remarkable at getting talented actors to work in his films. He also gave opportunities to young actors who had very little experience. So the quality of the acting in that film is all over the place. It's not, nobody's bad, everybody's good, but they're good for what they can do. And I'm not sure they were all on the same beat in that film.
Sure.
If you watch that film, you'll see some really deep and dense work, and you'll see some really, just all surface and right out there work. All of that's fine in a genre film, but putting it together was not that easy, and so therefore, to some degree, it didn't come out the way I saw it on the page and the way I
Yeah.
heard it when I wrote it.
Okay.
On the other hand, putting it together, again, let me give really credit to the technicians that Charlie put together back in those Empire days. There were terrific effects people. There were terrific editors. There were terrific tech people to work with, and they, more than anything, made that film work.
Sure.
But I thought that was a pretty good story we found there, and I also always like to have, to some degree, to lay a subtext or two or 10 into the work that I do, and that film was not only true to the text, but it was true to the subtext. So I'm talking about it as if it were an unalloyed. Some of my comments sound as if it were an unalloyed triumph, but it ain't. It was an uneven effort. But again, that's how hard it is to make a film. And
Sure.
when you were cranking them out the way Empire did, that film came out pretty well. It just was not exactly the film that I saw in the script that I wrote. Although if you write a script in 12 days, you're partly hallucinating it. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure when I read it and heard it, it was exactly what was on the page.
Sure.
But still, yeah, it's true. And there was another film I did for Charlie that Charlie directed called Hiss of the Beast. It was
Mm.
also released as Meridian, so
Okay.
it's out there under two titles.
Yeah.
And if you look it up on YouTube, and you can watch it in like 5 discrete sections on YouTube, uh, it's it was an experiment on my part. I was learning to write screenplays at the time, and I was also teaching Gothic fiction. My day job was to be an academic, an English teacher. I went on to run some writing programs
Yeah.
at Hunter College in the City University of New York. But I, for a long time, taught Gothic fiction or Gothic texts in the literary courses that I taught. And I really wanted to experiment writing a romance, like a romance novel that, and if you read romance novels, most of them have Gothic elements in them. So I was experimenting in that mode, writing that script. And again, because I was experimenting and I was sort of a novice in that subgenre, it didn't come out quite as well as I wanted it to. But if you get a chance, watch that film on YouTube in the
Okay.
discrete pieces that it shows up. It looks and it runs like a giallo.
Okay.
And it was like, Charlie, you made this film into something else other than what I thought it was. And actually, that works pretty well. And again, I'm making it sound like it's not an unalloyed triumph. And if it's not, that's on me, because I was working in a mode where I was just trying things out.
Sure.
And when I look at it now, I see things that I could have done. I see areas that could have been imagined better. I see paths that the script could have taken that might have been more exciting.
Yeah.
But the fact that it comes off as a genre work within a genre that I greatly expect, the Italian giallos, that was kind of a pleasant surprise to me.
Yeah.
So, that's back in my early career, but my
Yeah.
early career was spent, I mean, Re-Animator was not the first script that I wrote.
Yeah.
And a couple others out there before that, and one had gotten made. But it was still, I'm not going to say I was young, but as in terms of my screenwriting career, I was a young screenwriter, and you learn as you go. I was just lucky to work with such good collaborators, with such
Yeah.
great collaborators.
Yeah. I mean, the names that you've worked with are definitely impressive.
Yeah.
So, however those connected, that was, you know, it was in the stars, it was like it
Right.
was meant to be.
Right.
You mentioned that you had done academics, you were a professor. You are no longer doing that, I'm assuming?
I'm retired. When
Retired.
This is great. When during the recent writers' strike, during the recent Writers Guild
Yeah.
strike, I was out there picketing with
Yeah.
everybody out, with all the rest of the people, and the rest of my union brothers and sisters. And I thought when I was marching, it struck me that I'm probably the only person here who's retired and on strike. It's an odd situation to be in. I had
Yeah.
retired from my academic job right before the pandemic.
Okay.
And then during the pandemic, if you recall, Stuart Gordon passed away.
Yeah.
And it was in several online memorials for Stuart that I reconnected with Barbara, which
Oh,
was
okay.
just, again, huge good fortune. And when we reconnected, we were looking forward to, let's use the pandemic to prepare a piece for production if we possibly can. And we went back and forth, and that's how Suitable Flesh that was the well, it's not, it wasn't the genesis of Suitable Flesh. Suitable Flesh goes back to the 90s, and working with Stewart. Stewart was working on, if I recalled correctly, he had gone from Castle Freak to Dagon.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and we were thinking about what was the next project we might work on.
Interesting.
And we had both always liked, and again, we defaulted to Lovecraft adaptations.
Yeah. So that was like a shared interest that the two of you had, was the Lovecraft connection.
Yeah, that was, we Stuart and I went back to high school. We met each other in high school.
Wow.
And he was an art student, and I was a science and math student. And the interesting overlap there was science fiction. When you're a science student, when you're in math and science, the fiction, and you're an avid reader, which I was, the fiction that you read is science fiction. Yeah. And discovered that Stewart had the same, sort of the same sensibility. When we were actually good students, we were very good students. Stewart was the secretary of his graduating class, and I was an honor student. But every once in a while, we would cut class, and when we did, it was to go see a Hammer film. And and that's how, and so we were connected through in that genre, in the sci-fi horror genre, from the earliest stages of our friendship.
Yeah.
And then Stuart got into theater when he went to the University of Wisconsin. I was his roommate for a couple of years. And then he started a terrific theater that did great narrative drama, the Organic Theater in Chicago. He was one of the founders of the Chicago theater scene as it currently exists. And when he got a chance to do film in the 80s, when, let's add another name to the list, when Brian Usna showed up and said, "You want to make a film, Stuart?" And Brian Usna is, well, what you could do in the mid 80s, in the early 80s, to make a low budget film, you either made a comedy or a horror film. Those were the available genres to you, which were likely to get made, greenlit, and screened, and released to screens.
Yeah. And
so we chose horror films, but we snuck the comedy in there, and did Re-Animator. And that's how we got into the Lovecraft genre. And to some degree, it was because it had been a synergy in Stuart and my sensibility together for decades by that point. But it was also the fact that Lovecraft is in the public domain, so you can adapt Lovecraft.
Oh, okay.
And put it immediately on the screen.
Sure.
And Stuart, and I think Stuart, in his Watch for Stewart's memoir, his autobiographical memoir, has just been released, I think, by Fab Press, an English press, and it's called Naked Theater and Uncensored Horror. And he gives a friend of his credit for turning him on to the Re-Animator stories, to the Herbert West stories, as early Lovecraft, because he was looking at some other things, and that, and the rest is history. So after several successful adaptations of Lovecraft's work, we were looking for the next one to do in the late mid-90s, and we both liked Thing on the Doorstep. The Thing on the Doorstep, we thought, was an unfilmed, to that point, masterpiece. Actually, it's one of Lovecraft's more, to our way of thinking, more dramatic stories. The Billy build of it was more
Yeah.
dramatic. If you look at From Beyond, where our work From Beyond, we tell the whole story of From Beyond. We tell all of Lovecraft's story before the credits. The rest of it is our imagination, our imaginations going wild, inspired by Lovecraft. But Thing on the Doorstep is a complete drama in and of itself.
Yes.
It's open-ended on both ends. The story starts well past the middle of that story because of the nature of the malevolent consciousness in it, inherent in the story itself. And by the end, that malignant consciousness may or may not be available for future narratives.
Yeah.
But but within itself, it was a terrific story that Lovecraft demonstrated his complete storytelling, his chops.
Yeah.
And we all both liked the story for a long time.
Yeah.
So I took a whack. He said, "Why don't you work on that one?" So I took a whack at the script, and it came out well, we thought. Stewart schlepped it. He took it around. It was optioned several times and never got made. And I will let you guess why it was optioned and still not made. The reason the options lapsed before it could get made were always the same. It was 3 different times, and the reason was always the same. And you want to guess what it was?
So I had a thought, but it's probably not this reasoning. So Lovecraft's name became a little bit controversial for a period of time.
Yeah. Lovecraft's name is, if anything, it only gets more controversial.
Yeah.
As we evolve as a society.
Yes. So is that
and rightly so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to have that Lovecraft discussion anytime. If you want me back, we can have that discussion.
Yeah.
But no, that's not it.
Okay. All right.
It's in Lovecraft's name.
Yeah.
It was, there's too much sex.
Oh. All right.
And Stewart and I looked at each other and we go, we don't understand that sentence.
Yeah.
How does that, we don't understand, that doesn't make sense to us. In one case, it was this, there's too much sex, and that's not Lovecraft. And that was, again, we would argue that. We would argue that with you, that inherent in Lovecraft's work is so much suppressed sexuality that you cannot tell those stories in film terms where you have to show things without that being one of your major themes. Without sexuality, the potential of the perverse potential of sexuality being one of your central themes. It's all of this, Dagon, Shadow over Innsmouth is, the whole Innsmouth look in certain characters comes from a perverse sexual past that no one quite rightly wants to talk about, but is there and is the germ of the horror, is the germline of the horror through all of those stories that connect to Innsmouth. And if you carefully read The Thing on the Doorstep, it connects to that Innsmouth mythology. So and we would tweak it a little bit, but it still had too much sex. And then we tweak it a little more, and it still had too much sex. And we tweak it a little more. And to Barbara and Joe's credit, especially Joe, they said, okay, too much sex. We don't understand that either. Let's make this movie.
Okay.
And it is faithful with a couple of twists.
Yeah, and I want to come back to those twists, but just really quick for our listeners right now, could you offer a brief synopsis for those not familiar with the film's premise?
You know, that's a slightly problematic because because there's spoiler alert after spoiler alert
Yeah.
after
And
spoiler
which is
alert.
why when you look online, the plot synopsises are so brief. It is literally a sentence.
True,
And
true,
it has to be, I guess, right?
true.
It has to be.
Yeah, it
Otherwise,
has to be. Otherwise, you're giving too much away.
and
But there
one I
is
actually read was
but
false.
right, right. Oh no, that's terrible. But
Yeah, yeah.
almost understandable.
Yeah.
But it's sort of as I was describing the story before, and what attracted us to it is there's a malevolent consciousness that goes back before the story, as far back into history as perhaps is imaginable. And that malevolent consciousness works its way through several characters
Yeah.
over the course of the story of the thing on the doorstep. And the travails of humans trying to struggle with this malevolent consciousness leads to the destruction of several characters, both their physical destruction, which is why that thing on the doorstep is almost unrecognizable as a human being, to the psychological destruction of several of the characters,
Sure.
including the narrator.
Yeah.
So is that good enough?
That's good. That's good. One of the major changes that was made to adapt this for screen is you made the conscious choice to have our main protagonists or antagonists, maybe both, maybe one or the other.
and
Um,
that's the spoiler alert. The
so
protagonist
so we
is
don't
the
know who's.
antagonist, and then is
Sometimes we
the
don't know who's who.
protagonist again, and then is the antagonist
Yeah,
again.
but so you made them the conscious choice to make them therapists.
Yes.
So I was curious, what was the thought process around that? What was the intention around that?
Uh, we several there. It's a complex context, which I'll try to simplify a little bit. One, it's a psychological story. You're talking about consciousness moving from one being to another. That's a psychological, that happens psychologically. It happens in the process of psychoanalysis, and it's
So
called transference.
transference,
So
and that was my assumption that you intentionally did it because
one of
of
one of
transference.
the working titles at one point was transference.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's so we decided, oh, that fits well with a in if uh when you update Lovecraft,
Yep.
you need to professionalize it a little bit to put it into professions in the modern world. We put re-animator in a modern college, in at Miskatonic University, at the medical school at Miskatonic University, and used all the current technology that we had in the 80s. We did this as well. The hospital at Miskatonic University,
Yeah.
the University Hospital, is the setting for a great deal of suitable flesh.
Yeah.
And again, it's that link. That link with, remember From Beyond? What did Barbara play? She played a psychiatrist who was connected with the medical school
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Miskatonic University. So Barbara was going to be in. So we thought, yes, that it fits well. Not only that, you get the whole. You transfer the sexual tension between the characters to a more perverse setting, to the sexual attraction of a doctor for a patient, which is a terrible taboo. And one of the things we do in our movies is address the most terrible taboos we can find. So that follows that. I thought you were gonna mention an entirely different adaptation.
So my reason for asking about the profession specifically is I outside of doing this stuff, I am a therapist. So watching that film, I was immediately like that theme of transference was coming up for me. So when you just said that, it kind of confirmed
Mhm.
my thought process around it. And even like into the early scenes, I was like, I kind of was getting the theme even before there was like actually something that kind of was said along those lines of there being transference in the relationship. And I was like, I see it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So, because from a profession, because I am not a therapist. I am, if anything, I should be in therapy. But the fact that a professional therapist is telling me that that is recognizable in the film means we did a good job. We did
Yeah.
it, and not just me, but Heather, who plays the
Yeah.
psychiatrist, and Joe, who tells the story as the director.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's a few scenes where she's with other patients and her
Mhm.
mind wanders
Mhm.
and she's thinking of others and she's thinking about a specific person, and she kind of has these moments where like she's just not attending to the person she's with, and at one point she's like physically not attending to him, which is kind of a funny scene,
Yeah,
and it's serious but funny at the same time.
serious but
um
funny. That's
yeah,
us.
but it's human. It's so
Mhm.
human. Like to think that somebody can be present all the time and not have their mind wander and not, have these feelings for other people or have thoughts about other people and have these confusion, or, there's so many elements of humanity that's kind of gets overlooked because of somebody's title, right?
Well, let me
Um,
stop. Let me address that for a second.
yeah,
We think of doctors as having a monolithic authority. They are, and because we want them
yeah,
to be authoritative, we want them to give us a real diagnosis. We want them to give us a real prognosis, and then we want them to save our lives or to save our well-being. And so we give them a great deal of authority, and they are still just human beings. And if you
yeah,
look at our films, they're very much like that. Uh, you know, the that's a central theme in Reanimator. The 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 character that has the most authority, the most monolithic authority, the characters that have the most monolithic authority in Reanimator are the craziest doctors. Are Herbert West, who believes he can defeat death,
yeah,
and Dr. Hill, who is, if anything, the model awful doctor,
yeah,
and that's they're they're flawed humans who those don't respect the responsibility of those
yeah,
flaws,
yeah,
and that makes Herbert almost a tragic figure.
sure,
It makes Dr. Hill the antagonist. It makes him the villain. So I mean, and then think of From Beyond. Uh, Barbara Crampton's character in From Beyond, the psychiatrist that she plays, who is described at the beginning as a girl wonder. She has the authority of current practice,
hmm,
and yet at the end of the film, if anything, she's mad. She's been driven mad
yep,
by the discovery of her own uh, psychosis.
yeah,
So yes, we are constantly dealing with that theme. This is what the when I worked on uh, the thing on the doorstep, uh, it was in that same mode, and
yep.
with imagining in that same continuity with the films that we had made, which is why I think Suitable Flesh is a worthy.
Yeah. So there's a thing that happens, and I don't know if this was intentional, but I think this is a super valuable lesson for professionals that are in the field. Her issues really start when she doesn't maintain her professional boundaries.
Right.
So there's a specific instance that happens, and instead of going by what she knows she should do, setting the firm boundaries and limits between a professional to a patient, she starts to have like she over sympathizes with the patient, and she
To say the
allows,
least.
yes, and she allows the patient to to kind of invade her personal space, And that is when she starts to spiral in many ways, in many different ways, which isn't a spoiler because it's more like even just him consuming her thoughts and kind of feeling that idea like I need to save this person, and
Right.
that is all stemming from that idea like we have to set up professional boundaries and we have to understand our own limitations. We're not paid professionals to save people. We do the best we can, parameters of our role in that in their lives and in our lives. So I thought that was a great message that was sent. And like I said, I don't even know if that was intentional, but I totally gleaned it, and it was great.
There's a line. Recall your re-animator. There's a line in re-animator at the very beginning, not the pre-credit sequence,
Sure.
but the first sequence after that, where Dan Kane is trying to save a life, where he is part of a team trying to save a life. And the head doctor, played by Stewart's wife, Carolyn Purdy Gordon, calls the death at a certain point, and Dan refuses to give up. And that's when we sympathize with him. He's an idealistic young doctor, and he continues chest compressions. And she finally drags him off of the dead body and says, that's touching, Mr. Kane, but a good doctor knows when to stop.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the same theme that you're talking about that runs through the larger healthcare perspective of Suitable Flesh. We're nothing if not consistently horrific in our we're really one of the great things about the Gothic genre and about horror as a genre is that when you tell a story, you get to crawl as deeply into the character's psychology as you possibly can. Yeah, you crawl into their biology as well, but the real horror is usually psychological horror. That's why Psycho is one of the greatest horror films ever made.
Sure.
So you are finding the place where our rational and human identities that we cling to, that we create for ourselves and that we cling to, become tenuous. And that's where the real horror starts. Stuart and I never wanted to tell stories about us versus them, about terrible monsters, aliens that showed up on Earth or that we discover in space that we need to fight. These terrible aliens who are just awful, and we need to get rid of them. Our stories were always about how we could become the alien ourselves. And the struggle is within each and every character that shows up on screen.
Yeah.
It's not out there, us versus them. It's, oh my goodness, what have I become?
Right.
And that is a more human and we thought a more valuable story to tell. We always did.
I agree. Thank you for letting me nerd out a little bit with that kind of aspect on that.
This is, you have just lended authenticity to our work. I couldn't be happier.
Awesome. So I just, I wanted to just ask you, like you had said, you weren't too familiar with Joe Lynch's work prior, I believe you had said.
No, not really.
In his previous films, he definitely has his own style, and you can tell a Joe Lynch film. And when you watch this, it's no different. You can tell it's a Joe Lynch film. He puts his, like you had said, he kind of pulls out all the tricks, but he has like specific things. And I don't even know if I could really put a finger on what those are, but like immediately I was like, oh yeah, this is a Joe Lynch film. How cool was that to see like a different spin? Because you've worked with a lot of people a number of times, but you're working with this new director, and he has a new eye. How cool was that to kind of see the work that you were working, like developing, be put into a different frame than what you were used to?
It's double-edged, and both the edges are good.
Yeah.
One is, it was new. It was a new way. It was certainly a new way to look at this script. And as I said, I've been living with this script for decades. and it was a new way to look at the story and at how to tell it. And it worked like it worked like a charm. I was charmed by a number of his cinematic. They're not just tricks; they're techniques. And Joe just doesn't use the techniques for just to show off. He's using them because they have story value.
Yeah,
and they help to tell the story. And I was very impressed by that. How closely he hewed to the story that we were telling, how well his style fit that story, was able to tell that story. I was thrilled with that. And also the other edge of that sword is that there's still a continuity from Stewart's work to Joe's. There's a balls to the wall commitment to imaginatively exploring that story as far as you can, and telling it in the filmic terms, in using your full filmic vocabulary to tell that story. Yeah. And Stewart did the same thing. His vocabulary was just his vocabulary and his style were just somewhat different. There's significant overlap. There's significant shared skill sets, but the styles are to some degree different, and they both work. But Joe had met Stewart. Joe and as Stewart was a gentleman. Stewart was a big-hearted guy, and he loved working with actors, and actors loved working with him when he wasn't undressing them or cutting their throats. And he loved being around young filmmakers, especially the older he got. And he was not jealous of his talents or his opinions. And he loved to sit down with young filmmakers and talk to them, mentor them to the extent that he could, and share ideas with them. And Joe was one of them. And and I think it's not just a worthy successor to Stewart's work, but a step in another direction that is at once both respectful and absolutely individual.
Yeah. So, being from the birthplace of H.P. Lovecraft, I have to ask, do you have any future H.P. Lovecraft intentions? Do you plan to adapt any more work? Or do you think that this might be your last works?
The last rodeo? Mine's never.
Yeah.
I never think
within the HP realm.
I never think. I have stories in my head that I really hope I get to tell.
Yeah.
And projects I hope I get to work on. Within the Lovecraft oeuvre, there are plenty of stories to tell. Well, this story is open-ended. As I said earlier in trying to describe this story, it's open-ended. This story could go on just as From Beyond went on. Mm-hmm. Brian Usna made another 3 re-animator films because that story can go on.
Yeah.
Wonderful thing about Lovecraft is his work is seeped in this mythology that goes back for millennia and is open-ended in the future. There's nothing but awful discoveries to make. There's a whole new school of philosophy that started in, I believe, in the early aughts of this millennium. And I believe it's called skeptical realism, which nods to Lovecraft as reminding us that we don't know nearly as much as we think we know
Mm,
about what we might discover,
sure.
uh, and how dynamically awful that discovery may turn out to be. And we should be more humble, and we should be more careful than we are. A good doctor knows when to stop.
Yeah.
So uh,
That's a great tie-in right there.
so
Yeah.
so we so uh, I'm Stuart and I really were skeptical of doing sequels to our own work.
Yeah.
But they are out there to do.
Sure.
That is possible. And now that I'm back working in Lovecraft, it's interesting to see where that imagination can go. I was just at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon, and there are people turning out shorts and features based in Lovecraft's work uh, almost weekly, if not daily.
Yeah.
It's that oeuvre of work, the collected work of H.P. Lovecraft is so suggestive, besides being so imaginative, that it could almost go on forever.
Sure.
And I'm if you look back at Stuart and my work, we also adapted Poe several times. And there's more of Edgar Allan Poe's work to do too.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of work out there to do. I haven't settled on anything, and I've got a couple of original stories I'd like to tell. Most of my work, if you go back and look at that filmography you referred
Hmm.
to at the beginning of this
Yeah.
interview, is work for hire. Dennis, could you work on this? Dennis, could
Sure.
you? This script, so the thing on the door, the script for Thing on the Doorstep, which became Suitable Flesh, was Dennis. Why don't we work on this story now? So I've been and thrilled to work in that context. But there are other stories to tell, and I don't know what's next. But is there a Lovecraft? Is there more Lovecraft to adapt? Damn right
Sounds
there
like
is.
sounds like it.
There's plenty.
And I know, and I'll just drop this little line right here. I know that you are very well versed in Irish literature from what I read.
Yeah,
So I mean, and that maybe making a story with some Irish folklore would be pretty awesome too. I do love some good folklore. So there's there's so much out there that can be created and be adapted, or new works that it's the
I've got
world is.
I've got a treatment for an Irish film if anybody's interested.
There
That's
you go.
hello
There you
out
go.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's yeah, I've got and I've got a box full of projects that this was in the box. The
Yeah.
script for Suitable Flesh was in a box for 20 some years, and you never give up on a project, and that's not uh, the only time that's happened. I've had several scripts that were more than a decade old that were ultimately produced and appreciated. So, so
Wow.
I'm not giving up on any of
Yeah.
those. And if anybody wants to rummage around in my box of tales,
Yeah.
let me know, and I'd be glad to talk to you about
All right, everybody. That's an open invitation right there. So don't pass that
it.
up. Dennis, I have to thank you. This was awesome. This was so much knowledge, so much experience and everything. And Suitable Flesh was such an enjoyable film.
Ain't it? It's fun. It
It
was,
really was. It
you
really
know,
was. It
it's
brought me
always
back.
scary for me to sit down and watch the films that are been, because
Sure.
as the writer, you're the first person off the project. I have never been on
Yep.
this.
Yep.
I put it out there and it's gone until it's done. And
Yeah.
then you sit down there and you just sweat. And I have been so lucky in my career to work with, I've been lucky in two ways, to work with such talented people and to work with friends. And
to build friendships from these experiences, like you
the
were saying with Barbara. Yeah,
process of that work. Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
I'm good friends with Jeffrey still.
Yeah,
Jeffrey Combs.
yeah, yeah.
God, I would love to work with him again.
I know when you were talking about future stories, I was like, oh, I wish you would bring back Jeffrey Combs. That would be amazing
Yeah, sure,
to
I'd
see
love
him
to.
in a future
Yeah, well,
project.
yeah, I'm gonna get off of this. I'm gonna get off of this
Yeah,
podcast and
yeah,
call Jeffrey.
awesome.
Let's see. Let's see what we can cook up.
Absolutely. All right. So, everybody, I can't stress it enough. Go check out Suitable Flesh either in theaters or for rent October 27th, right before Halloween. Perfect timing for it. Dennis, thank you again. And I hope we get the
You're welcome.
opportunity to
Thank
talk
you.
to you down the road. If you
Sure.
are in Rhode Island for an HB Lovecraft convention, make sure you let us know so we can meet up in
Sure.
person. But
Sure.
this
It's a
was
deal.
great.
It's a day. It's a date. That's terrific.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Dennis.
You're
And
welcome.
everybody, we will be back with another episode next week. Thank you for listening. And